I parked in front of Kevin's house at 15:30 sharp, as agreed. My hands still smelled of dog treats and sanitizer from the shelter. I'd helped bathe my new pet this morning, a large sheepdog mix that had been brought in yesterday. The poor guy was in terrible shape, but he was starting to trust people. Stories like that always warmed my heart. Kevin met me on the doorstep with a strained smile that didn't reach his eyes. At 47, he looked tired and irritable, as if my simple request for Sunday family dinner was an impossible burden. His hair was thinning noticeably, and his stomach protruded from beneath the polo shirt he wore on weekends as a successful middle-class American. "Hi, Mom," he said, barely touching my cheek with his lips. "Lisa's in the backyard, cooking meat. The guys are around here somewhere." I walked through the familiar living room, where everything was arranged with Lisa's impeccable neatness. The couch cushions lay at right angles, the coffee table glistened with polish, and the shelves were lined with family photos in matching silver frames. There wasn't much of me in those pictures. Mostly Kevin and his wife and kids on various vacations and celebratory moments. In the backyard, Lisa stood at the grill in immaculate jeans and a top that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Her blonde hair was styled like she'd just gotten out of the salon, even though she'd supposedly spent all day at home. At my appearance, she turned around with a wide smile that looked as artificial as her husband's. "Ruth, how are you, dear?" She held out her hand to me, but didn't come close for a hug. "You're early. We're not ready yet." "I can help," I offered, though I knew I'd be rebuffed. Lisa never let me do anything in her kitchen, as if she was afraid I'd mess up her system or do something wrong. "Oh no, it's under control. Sit down, rest." I settled into a wicker chair under the awning and looked around. Kevin and Lisa's yard was a model of suburban perfection: neatly cut grass, beds of uniform flowers, new teak garden furniture. Everything looked beautiful and lifeless, like a picture from a catalog. The grandchildren showed up when Lisa was already flipping cutlets. Jason, 16, walked past me toward the refrigerator, mumbling something like a greeting. Emily, 14, sat on the edge of the pool with her phone in her hands, not taking her eyes off the screen even to say hello. "Jason got his license," Lisa reported, flipping the meat. "He can drive himself to practice now." "That's great," I said, though the boy didn't even look up from his phone. "How's school going, Jason?" "Fine," he mumbled, not turning around. When we sat down at the table, I decided to tell him about my morning at the shelter. The sheepdog story was really touching, the way the dog gradually thawed, the way he wagged his tail timidly when I offered him a treat. "Today they brought us such a handsome boy," I began. "A large mestizo, apparently, German shepherd with someone else. Someone dumped him by the highway. Can you believe it? But he's starting to trust people. I think he'll find a new home quickly." Lisa nodded with a polite smile, continuing to cut the meat. Kevin mumbled something in response, but I could see he was thinking about something else. The kids didn't even lift their heads from their plates. "And last week we adopted 3 kittens," I continued, hoping to interest Emily at least. The babies had been dropped off in a cardboard box. They were so tiny, they hadn't even opened their eyes yet, but we got them out, and now they're in good families. "Mom, have you ever thought about getting a dog?" Kevin suddenly asked, and I was glad to have him in the conversation. "Oh, I had thought about it, but you see, there are so many animals in need at the shelter that it's better to help so many than to have just one." "Yes, of course," he agreed, but I sensed something insincere in his tone. Lisa got up to collect plates, even though we hadn't finished eating. "By the way, Ruth, do you remember our neighbor Michelle? She just got back from a Caribbean cruise. She said it was amazing." The conversation drifted to neighbors, vacations, and shopping. I tried to mention the shelter again, to talk about the new volunteer program we were planning to start, but Kevin immediately started talking about work issues. I listened to him talk about the difficulties of the automobile business, nodding from time to time and inserting appropriate remarks. But my thoughts were still in the shelter, with that big dog who dared to approach a human for the first time in a long time. The sun was setting when Lisa brought out dessert, a store-bought cheesecake that she laid out on her china plate and served as if she'd made it herself. The kids immediately reached for the bigger pieces, and the adults politely complimented the flavor. "I have to go," I said when we had finished our coffee. "It's an early day at the orphanage tomorrow." "Sure, Mom." Kevin stood up, clearly relieved. "Thanks for coming." Lisa hugged me goodbye, quickly and formally, as if performing an obligatory ritual. The kids mumbled goodbye without taking their eyes off their phones. I got in the car and waved goodbye to them. Kevin was already turning toward the house. Lisa was gathering dishes, and the kids had disappeared into the house. Just an ordinary Sunday, an ordinary family dinner. But for some reason it felt heavy on my soul, as if I had spent time not with loved ones, but with polite strangers who tolerated my presence out of propriety. On the way home, I thought about that big dog at the shelter and how he had gingerly accepted a treat from me. There, among abandoned animals, I felt needed, but here, among my own family, it felt like I was just playing a part in a play that had bored everyone long ago. After lunch, I asked to go to the bathroom, but really, I just wanted to be alone for a while and collect my thoughts. Being with my family was more tiring than a full day of work at the shelter. There I felt useful, but here I felt like an intrusive old woman who was interfering with people's lives. The first floor restroom was next to the kitchen, and as I washed my hands, I heard Kevin and Lisa's voices. They were apparently putting away the dishes and thought I couldn't hear them. At first, I wasn't going to eavesdrop, but I heard my name and involuntarily froze. "Thank God she's finally packed," Lisa said, and there was an unconcealed weariness in her voice. "I thought she'd be here all night with her dog stories." "Yeah," Kevin said, clinking plates. "It's the same thing every time. Kittens, puppies, mongrels. Honestly, I was sick of it." I stood at the sink, gripping the edges of the basin, and felt something cold spill into my chest. Had my stories about the orphanage annoyed them that much? Did the things that gave my life meaning seem to them like the idle chatter of an old woman? "And remember last time she spent half an hour talking about that cat with one eye?" Lisa continued, and I heard her loading the dishwasher. "I didn't know where to put my eyes anymore. The kids left as soon as she started." "I understand," Kevin agreed. "At least she doesn't bring them here. Can you imagine if she got a dog? We'd have to listen to Rex poop or something every time she got a dog." They laughed, and that laughter sent a chill through me. So they weren't just disinterested in my work at the shelter, they were openly mocking it. All my attempts to share the joy of rescued animals, of small victories and touching stories, were perceived by them as the boredom of an old woman who can't find anything better to do. "Speaking of Mom," Kevin's voice grew serious. "I'm thinking maybe it's time to talk to her about a nursing home. Not now, of course, but in about 5 years. She lives alone in that big house. It's not practical." "I agree." Lisa closed the dishwasher door with a distinctive click. "And her house is in a good neighborhood, probably expensive. It's a shame that such real estate is just idle." "Yeah, I've been thinking about it." Kevin's voice sounded businesslike, as if he were discussing a good deal at a car dealership. "If we sold the house now, while the market was good, we could get a good deal. Put some of it toward the nursing home, and some of it, for the kids, for their education." I felt my legs go weak. So they'd already made plans for my property, already calculating how much they could get from selling the house where I'd lived with Roger for 30 years, where my children had been born and raised. where every corner was filled with memories. Just be careful with this topic, warned Lisa. You know how stubborn she is. If you directly talk about the nursing home, she may take offense. I understand. We need to set the stage. Kevin agreed. Maybe we could start by telling her that it's hard for her to run a household like this on her own, that we're worried about her safety. That's a good idea. And then we could show her some decent places to eat. There are these modern nursing homes now, more like hotels. Not the cheap ones, Kevin added. She'll think we're trying to sell her out. We'll show her something mid-range so it doesn't look like we're saving money on mom. Saving on mom. These words sounded especially cynical in the mouth of the man I gave birth to in agony, nursed, treated for childhood diseases, took to school, helped with homework. A person for whom I gave up many of my plans and desires, because I considered motherhood the main calling of my life. And what if she does not agree? Lisa asked. You know, she can stubbornly stubborn on principle. Then we'll have to go through a lawyer, Kevin said after a pause. At her age, all sorts of things can happen. You could plead age inadequacy or something like that. Age inadequacy. Me, who got up at 6 in the morning every day, drove, worked at the shelter, watched the house, cooked, read, watched the news, and was perfectly aware of what was going on around me. The only thing that made me inadequate was that I didn't fit into their plans of a convenient and uncomplaining mother who had to gratefully accept any decisions made by the children for her own good. Well, that's an extreme case. Lisa was clearly feeling uncomfortable with this turn of the conversation. I hope it doesn't come to that. Sure, Kevin agreed, but it's better to be prepared for anything. Anyway, in a few years, she'll be 75, and then no one will say we're in a hurry. 75 years. That means I have 3 more years of relative freedom before my own children start actively planning my confinement in a nursing home. 3 years to enjoy my own home, the garden I'd planted with my own hands, the rooms with the furniture Roger and I had chosen. By the way, why did you invite her? Lisa asked, moving on to cleaning the kitchen surfaces. We could have had a nice family dinner. Come on, in Kevin's voice sounded fake virtue. You can't just forget about your parents. People will judge, and the kids need to see that we care about Grandma. That's right, agreed Lisa. A good example for the children, although they already do not notice it much. But then they won't say we're bad kids. Kevin laughed. That we regularly invited them over and talked to them. A clear conscience. A clear conscience at the expense of Sunday dinners, which they arranged not out of love or desire to spend time with their mother, but only for the sake of ticking boxes. To have something to answer the neighbors and acquaintances to the question, "How is Mom?" so that the children saw the correct model of behavior with elderly relatives, so that in the future, when I'm put in a nursing home, they can tell everyone that they took care of me as best they could. And these stories about animals, continued Lisa, frankly, I just annoy me. I understand that a person needs a hobby, but couldn't you have chosen something more normal? Like knitting or gardening, Kevin suggested. Yeah, or a book club, or an art class. You go to her and she's talking about some flea-bitten mongrels like it's the most important thing in the world. Flea-bitten mongrels. That's what Lisa called the animals I tried to help find homes and loving owners. Animals who were often saved from death only because of the work of volunteers like me. To her, they were just dirty, annoying creatures unworthy of decent people's attention. Okay, don't feel bad. Kevin clearly wanted to end this conversation. Once every 2 weeks, it's okay. At least she's happy. She thinks we care about her. Every 2 weeks. So even this pathetic frequency of our meetings seemed burdensome. I thought we were meeting every Sunday, but it turned out to be much less frequent. It just didn't seem that way to me. because I looked forward to each meeting. It's a good thing Cynthia didn't come today, Lisa said. Otherwise, it would have been a contest to see who couldn't stand Mom's stories more. They laughed again, and I realized I couldn't take it anymore. Cynthia, my daughter, who called me every week and always wondered what I was up to, turned out to be in on this discussion too. She too considered my stories about the orphanage an annoying nuisance that had to be tolerated out of politeness. I quietly opened the bathroom door and tiptoed to the exit. In the hallway, I grabbed my purse, which I'd left on the console, and just as silently opened the front door. I was lucky that Kevin and Lisa were busy talking in the kitchen, and the kids were sitting in their rooms at their computers as usual. Stepping outside, I carefully closed the door, trying not to slam it. The last thing I wanted was explanations and fake apologies. I didn't need their pity or awkward attempts to smooth things over. What I heard was their true opinion of me, and no words could change that. I reached the car and got behind the wheel, but I didn't start the engine right away. I needed time to digest what I'd heard. My hands shook as I took the keys out of my purse. My throat lumped, and tears began to gather in my eyes as I tried to hold them back. So this was the true attitude of my children. I was a burden to them, a source of irritation, an object of pity. My attempts to share what was really important to me were treated like the annoying chatter of an old woman. And my house, my property, had long been seen by them as a future inheritance to be realized profitably. I started the car and drove slowly away from the house. In the rearview mirror, I could see the lighted windows, behind which the lives of the people who considered me superfluous continued. Perhaps they wouldn't even notice I was gone for a while. And when they did, they'd assume I just didn't say goodbye so as not to distract them. On the way home, I thought about how long this pretense had lasted. How many months or even years had my children played out the show of loving and caring offspring, actually counting the days until I died or moved into a nursing home? When exactly did I become not a mother to them, but a problem to be solved in the most convenient way possible? Maybe it started after Roger died. While he was alive, the kids behaved differently, coming over more often, socializing more naturally, not rushing to leave. Roger knew how to keep up a conversation, took an interest in their affairs, gave advice on work and family life. Perhaps they came mostly to see him, and I was just a pleasant addition to the meetings with my father. Or was it about money? When my husband died, I inherited a decent amount of money, insurance, retirement savings, a house that had increased in value considerably over 30 years. Perhaps it was then that the children first seriously thought about inheritance and realized that it was worth putting up with their mother for the sake of future benefits. When I reached home, I sat in the car in the driveway for a long time. The house greeted me with dark windows. I'd forgotten to turn on the lights before I left. Roger usually left the living room lamp on to make the house look lived in. Now I had to think of everything on my own, and sometimes I forgot the little things. As I entered the house, I turned on the light in the hallway and immediately felt the contrast with the place I had just left. Everything here was mine. Every painting, every knickknack, every piece of furniture had been chosen with love and attention by Roger and me. Here, I didn't have to pretend that I was happy to see people who really couldn't stand me. Here, I could be myself. I walked into the kitchen and put the kettle on. The usual evening ritual was a cup of herbal tea before bed. But tonight, this tea was supposed to help me calm down after the shock and think about what to do with the information I had received. How to go on living, knowing the truth about what the people closest to me thought of me. While the water boiled, I looked out the window at my small backyard, where the flowers I planted every spring grew. Unlike Lisa's immaculate flower beds, my garden was a little chaotic, but vibrant. It was home to plants that I liked, not what the landscaping magazines prescribed. Tomorrow morning, I will drive to the shelter, and I am genuinely welcome there. Animals can't fake it. If a dog wags his tail, it means he's genuinely happy. If a cat purrs in your arms, it means she's really happy. None of them will tolerate my presence out of politeness or for future benefits. The kettle whistled, and I made chamomile tea. Sitting down at the kitchen table with a hot cup, I tried to figure out how I felt. Pain, of course, disappointment, resentment, but also a strange relief at finally knowing the truth. No more wondering why the kids had gotten so cold. I knew the answer now. The question was what to do with it. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning, even though my alarm had been set for 6. The dream was disturbing, full of scraps of last night's conversation that I'd overheard by accident. Kevin and Lisa's words echoed in my head with frightening clarity, like a tape recorder that couldn't be turned off. Mongrels, pity, nursing home, age inadequacy. Each word echoed with pain in my chest. Lying in bed in the pre-dawn silence, I tried to find some justification for their words. Maybe I really do talk too much about the orphanage. Maybe other people find my stories about the animals boring or inappropriate. But it's the only thing that has truly given my life meaning since Roger's death. Does the desire to share the joy of a life saved make me a compulsive old woman? I got out of bed and went to the window and pulled the curtains open. Beyond the glass was my little garden, not yet illuminated by the morning sun. The beds of asters and chrysanthemums I'd planted this year, the little fountain Roger had installed for our 25th wedding anniversary. All of this could be gone if my children's plans come to fruition. The new owners would tear down the fountain, uproot my flowers, plant an entirely different garden, or pave everything over for a parking lot altogether. After showering and drinking coffee, I dressed in old jeans and a sweater, my work clothes for the shelter. Usually in the morning, I felt a sense of anticipation for the day ahead, excited to meet the animals and other volunteers. Today, however, I drove there as if I were going to a safe haven where I could hide from thoughts of betrayal by those closest to me. The shelter was 20 minutes from my home, in an industrial part of town where rents were affordable for a non-profit organization. The one-story red brick building was not known for its beauty, but inside there was an atmosphere of love and care. I parked in a familiar spot next to the cars of other early volunteers and walked to the service entrance. Sarah, the volunteer coordinator, met me in the hallway with her usual warm smile. She was in her early 40s, had short brown hair and kind brown eyes that shone with genuine joy when she met me. "Good morning, Ruth," she said, putting her arm around my shoulders. "How was your weekend?" "It was fine," I said, not wanting to go into details. "How's our new lodger? That big dog they brought in on Saturday?" "Oh, Max, he's just wonderful." Sarah's eyes lit up. "He had a family with kids over yesterday, and he was so careful and gentle with the little ones. I think he has a good chance of finding a home. Max is the name of the Métis sheepdog I told my family about yesterday. A family who thought my telling them about him was a nuisance to their quiet Sunday lunch. But here at the shelter, Max's story mattered. Here, people realized that every animal saved was a small victory over cruelty and indifference. "Is he in the far enclosure today?" I asked. "Yes, we moved him there after his bath yesterday. He's much prettier without all that dirt." I walked through the main area of the shelter, where cats and small dogs lived in cages of various sizes. Many of the animals were awake and greeted me with happy meows and wagging tails. Here I was known and loved not for money or inheritance, but simply because I came every day, fed, bathed, stroked, talked to them in an affectionate voice. A tricolored cat named Spotty rubbed herself against the bars of the cage as I walked by. I stopped and petted her through the bars. Spotty had been here for 6 months, not the youngest, not the prettiest, with a slightly crooked tail broken as a child. Potential owners always chose more spectacular animals, and she continued to wait for her family with patience and hope. "Hello, beautiful," I whispered. "How are you?" The cat purred in response, and it was the most genuine response to my presence I'd heard in days. No one here tolerated me out of politeness. On the contrary, my appearance was always an event for the residents of the orphanage. Large dogs were kept in the far enclosures. Max was lying on a bed in the corner of his enclosure, but when he saw me, he immediately got up and came to the net. In one day, he was visibly transformed. His coat glistened with cleanliness. His eyes had lost the frightened glint I had seen on Saturday. He was really beautiful, powerful but not aggressive, with intelligent eyes and noble posture. "Hello, boy," I said, reaching out my hand toward the net. Max sniffed my fingers and licked them gently. Yesterday, he was still afraid of being touched, but today he was already allowing himself to trust people. This progress has always amazed me, the ability of animals to forgive cruelty and believe in kindness again. "Sarah says you had a family over yesterday." I continued talking to the dog. "I hope you like them." Max tilted his head to the side, listening to my voice. Maybe he couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the intonation, know he was being spoken to with love and care. Unlike my children, who listened to me with barely concealed irritation, this dog caught every word, every intonation. I pulled a treat out of my pocket, special dog cookies that I always carried with me. Max carefully took it through the net and ate it with pleasure. Then he sat down next to the fence and just looked at me, as if he wanted to continue communicating. "You know, Max," I said, squatting down so I was on the same level with him, "sometimes people disappoint more than you can imagine. You probably know that. Someone threw you out on the road like garbage." The dog kept looking at me, and in his eyes I saw understanding. Not understanding of the words, of course, but understanding of the pain, the loneliness, the betrayal. We both knew what it meant to be rejected by those who were supposed to love and protect. "But you know what the most amazing thing is?" I continued. "You're still willing to trust people, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust my kids again." The words were out of my mouth before I could think about them. For the first time since yesterday, I spoke out loud what was going on in my soul. I couldn't talk about it with my friends. It was too embarrassing to admit that my own children considered me a burden. But with Max, I could talk about anything. Behind the neighboring enclosures, other volunteers were talking quietly as they began their workday. Jane was bottle feeding the puppies. Their mother had been killed by a car, but the babies had been saved. Tom was changing the bedding in the cat cages, humming something under his breath. All these people didn't come here for money. There was no pay for volunteering. They came because they wanted to help, because they felt responsible for those who were weaker. Maybe that's why I felt so comfortable here. People capable of selfless love and care gathered here. People for whom saving an animal's life was not a strange hobby, but an important and necessary cause. "Ruth, could you help me with the new girl?" Jane called out to me. "A cat and kittens were brought in yesterday. The mom's very shy. She won't come near us." I said goodbye to Max, promising to come back later, and went to Jane's room. In a small private room used for animals requiring special care, a young cat with 3 tiny kittens was nestled in a corner on soft towels. The mother was thin and emaciated, with dull fur and wary eyes. "She was found in an abandoned house," Jane said. "Apparently, she lived there alone with the kittens, afraid to go out. The babies are only a few weeks old, but they are healthy." I approached the cat slowly, making no sudden movements. She tensed up, ready to protect the cubs, but she didn't run away. Her eyes showed the same fear I'd seen in Max's the first day, fear of people who might hurt her. Hi, Mom, I said quietly, sitting down on the floor a few feet away from the cat. No one wants to hurt you. We're here to help. The cat looked at me, assessing the level of danger. The kitten sucked on the milk, making quiet, contented noises. Maternal instinct compelled the cat to stay close to the cubs, even though she was afraid of humans. I pulled a jar of cat treats out of my pocket and opened it. The smell of food made the cat sniff around. Apparently, she was hungry. A nursing mother needs a lot of food, and food wasn't easy to find in an abandoned house. I put a few pieces on the floor between us and moved away. The cat hesitated for a long time, but hunger was stronger than fear. She cautiously crept over to the food and quickly grabbed a piece, ready to rush back to the kittens at any moment. "That's a good girl," I praised her. "Eat, you need your strength for the babies." Gradually, the cat relaxed and ate all the treats. Then she sat up and began to wash herself, a sure sign that the animal felt safe. The taming process has begun, and in a few days, she will probably allow people to touch herself and the kittens. Watching this little family, I thought about a mother's love. This cat risked herself to feed her cubs, lived in fear and cold, but did not abandon them. And my own children, whom I had raised, fed, loved, were now counting the days until I died and planning the sale of my house. What a bitter irony. The stray cat turned out to be a better mother than me and better children than mine. She didn't give up on her little ones despite all the hardships, and my kids were ready to abandon me at the first opportunity. "They'll find good owners," Jane said, coming closer. "Families with kittens go fast." "And Mommy?" I asked. "Will they take her too?" "I hope so, although it's harder to foster adult cats. But she's young. She'll be beautiful when she fattens up. She has a chance. She has a chance." This stray cat had a chance of finding a loving family, while I, who had lived for 72 years and raised 2 children, had no chance of a loving and understanding family of my own. I spent all day at the shelter helping with feeding, cleaning, and walking the dogs. The physical work helped me not to think about yesterday's conversation, but my thoughts kept coming back to what I had heard. By the end of the day, I had made a decision. Something had to change in my life. I couldn't keep pretending that nothing had happened. Returning home in the evening, I stopped at a stoplight and looked at an elderly woman crossing the road with a small dog on a leash. The woman was smiling, talking to the dog, and it was obvious they were happy together. Maybe Kevin was right, and I should have gotten my own pet. At least I would have someone who would be genuinely excited for me to come home. Silence and darkness greeted me at home. I turned on the light, put the kettle on, and sat down at the kitchen table with a notepad. If my children were making plans for my future, then I should have plans of my own. I wasn't going to passively wait for them to decide my fate. The first item I wrote was, "Talk to a lawyer." If Kevin and Lisa were already considering options for declaring me incompetent, I needed to take steps to protect my interests. The second item was, "Revise the will." And 3, "Resolve the house." I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but one thing was clear. I would not let my children run my life as if I were already dead. I have the right to live the life I want and spend my money on what I think is important. And important to me were the animals at the shelter who loved me simply for what I am. I woke up Tuesday morning with a clear head and a firm decision. In the 2 days since that Sunday lunch, I had thought a lot about Kevin and Lisa's words, and each time I felt the resolve to change my life grow stronger in me. No longer was I going to be a passive victim of someone else's agenda. After breakfast, I pulled out of my desk drawer a business card from David Wilson, the lawyer who had helped me with the paperwork after Roger's death. He was a middle-aged man with a professional approach to the case, and he had been patient and sensitive in dealing with the formalities of the estate. Dialing his office number, I asked the receptionist to make an appointment for me. Fortunately, Mr. Wilson had some time off on Thursday morning. I did not explain over the phone why I needed an appointment, saying only that I wanted to make changes to my documents. I spent the remaining days until Thursday going about my normal routine of traveling to the shelter, caring for the animals, and socializing with other volunteers. But now I was looking at this place with very different eyes. The shelter used to be my hobby, a way to fill the void after my husband's death. Now I realized it was the only place where I was truly valued and loved. Max, the big dog that was brought in on Saturday, has almost completely adapted by now. The family who came to see him decided to take him in, and the paperwork took place on Wednesday. Watching Max happily wagging his tail to his new owners, the children gently stroking his head, and the parents discussing where to put his bed, I thought that this is true happiness, when you are chosen not out of pity, but out of love. Another happy story, Sarah said, standing next to me and watching Max move on to a new life. He wouldn't have adapted so quickly without your help. He wanted to trust people on his own, I replied. I just had to give him time. You're amazing, Ruth. I don't know what we would do without you. The animals feel your genuine love. Those words warmed my soul more than all the formal compliments from the children over the past year. Sarah said it from the heart, and I knew she wasn't lying. This is where my contribution really mattered. Thursday morning, I dressed carefully. I wore the dark blue suit I bought for formal occasions, neatly styled my hair, and even put on a little makeup. It was important to look solid and adequate in case I ever had to prove that I was in my right mind when I made my decisions. Mr. Wilson's office was located in the business part of town, on the third floor of a modern building. The receptionist, an elegant woman in her 50s, greeted me with a professional smile and ushered me into the attorney's office. David Wilson rose from his desk to greet me. He looked exactly the same as he had 3 years ago: graying hair, attentive gray eyes behind glasses, a strict suit. Behind his back, volumes of legal reference books stood on shelves, and neatly folded documents lay on the desk. Mrs. Harrison, how are you? He asked, pointing to the visitor's chair. I hope you're not having trouble with the paperwork we did after your husband's death. No, there's nothing wrong with those documents, I replied, sitting down in the comfortable leather chair. I came for another matter. I want to change my will. Mr. Wilson nodded and pulled a notebook from his desk drawer. His face showed neither surprise nor curiosity. Apparently, requests to revise wills were common in his practice. Okay, let's first review what we have in the current will. He opened my file. According to the last will and testament, your son Kevin and daughter Cynthia inherit your entire estate in equal shares: house, bank accounts, insurance payments, personal effects. That's exactly what I want to change, I said, surprised at my own determination. I want to disinherit the children and bequeath all the assets to the Second Life Animal Shelter. Mr. Wilson lifted his eyes from the papers and looked at me carefully. In his gaze, I saw no judgment or attempts to change my mind, only a professional interest in his client's motives. This is a serious decision, Mrs. Harrison. May I ask about the reasons for this drastic change? It will help me to draw up the documents correctly and foresee possible legal nuances. I took a deep breath. Telling a stranger about my family problems was awkward, but necessary. My children consider me a burden. They're already planning to sell my house and put me in a nursing home, yet they pretend to care about me, inviting me to family dinners out of pity. I overheard them talking. The lawyer recorded my words, nodding from time to time. His face remained impartial, but there was a flicker of understanding in his eyes. I see. Why the animal shelter? Do you have a special relationship with that organization? I've been volunteering there for 3 years now, I explained. After my husband died, It became the meaning of my life. The animals at the shelter love me sincerely. They don't expect money or property from me. And the staff appreciates my work. It's the only place I feel needed. That's good. That's a good reason for this decision. Mr. Wilson put down his pen and looked at me seriously. But I must warn you of the possible consequences. Your children can contest the will in court. They could claim you were incapacitated or argue that you were acting under someone else's influence. That's why I came to you now, while I am fully competent and healthy, I replied. Is there anything they can do if the will is correct? Technically, they can try, but it will be very difficult to prove incapacity if we have a medical report on your mental health at the time of making the will. I recommend that you have a psychiatric assessment. This will be an additional defense against possible claims. The idea of a psychiatric examination seemed sensible to me. Let it be official proof that I made the decision in my right mind. I agree. What about the wording of the will? What's the best way to word it? I'll draft the document in as much detail as possible, stating the specific reasons for your decision, your volunteer work, your attachment to the orphanage, your frustration with the children. The more details, the harder it will be to contest the will. Mr. Wilson took out a blank sheet of paper and began writing down the main points of the future document. I dictated the details to him: the address of the orphanage, the full name of the organization, my wishes regarding the use of the funds. I want the money to be spent on improving conditions for the animals, on medical care, on programs to find owners, I said, feeling my decision becoming more and more final with each word. And definitely on employee salaries. They work for pennies, but they do important work. We can create a trust fund with specific directions for spending the money, the lawyer suggested. This would protect the money from misuse. We spent over an hour discussing the details. Mr. Wilson proved to be not only professional, but also understanding. He didn't try to talk me out of a drastic decision, but helped me to make it as intelligently as possible. When will the documents be ready? I asked when we had finished discussing the basics. By next week. I will prepare a draft. You will study it, make possible corrections, and we will make the final version. In the meantime, I suggest you make an appointment with a psychiatrist. I know a good one, Dr. Marissa Clark. She does this kind of work often, and she's very thorough and professional. Mr. Wilson gave me the doctor's business card and wrote down his direct phone number. If your children have any questions or complaints, call me right away. Do not try to handle legal matters on your own. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt strangely light. For the first time in years, I had made an important decision that was all about me and my desires. I was no longer a passive figure in someone else's game, but was becoming an active player who determined the rules. On my way home, I stopped at a cafe and ordered a coffee and cake, a small celebration of my decision. Sitting by the window and watching the passers-by, I thought about how my life would change. No longer would I have to put up with my children's fake concern, pretending that I didn't notice their annoyance. No more fear that they would put me in a nursing home against my will. That evening, I called Dr. Clark and made an appointment for the next day. The receptionist explained that a few tests and an interview would be required for a competency evaluation, but that it wouldn't take more than 2 hours. As I went to bed, I thought about going to the shelter tomorrow morning as usual. But now it wouldn't just be volunteer work, but taking care of my future inheritance. Roger's money, our house, all of our savings will go to a cause that really matters to me. The shelter animals will get a chance at a better life, and my children will get a lesson that love cannot be faked for the sake of an inheritance. As I fell asleep, I pictured Kevin and Lisa's faces when they found out about my decision. They probably wouldn't believe me at first. Then they'd try to change my mind, and then they'd go to lawyers. But it'll be too late. I will finally do what I should have done a long time ago. Stop being a convenient mother and become an independent woman in charge of her own life. Friday morning, I woke up with a feeling I hadn't experienced in a very long time, a sense of control. Ahead of me was a visit to a psychiatrist, then the shelter, then the weekend, which I would spend not trying to please indifferent children, but in preparation for a new life, a life where my opinion and my wishes would matter. Dr. Clark was a pleasant woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a professional manner. Her office was decorated in calm colors, diplomas and certificates confirming her qualifications hung on the walls. Mr. Wilson explained the situation to me, she said, motioning for me to sit down in a comfortable chair. Do you want an opinion on your capacity in connection with a change of will? Yes. I want to protect myself from possible claims by my children. I see. It's a reasonable decision. We'll run some cognitive function tests. I'll ask you a series of questions, and if everything checks out, I'll issue an opinion. The tests were simple. Memorize and repeat a sequence of words, solve simple logic problems, answer questions about the current date and place. Then Dr. Clark questioned me about the reasons for changing my will, my relationship with my children, and my plans for the future. Your cognitive functions are completely normal, she said at the end of the examination. You adequately assess the situation, logically motivate your decisions. I found no signs of dementia or other mental disorders. The conclusion will be ready on Monday. Having received the document confirming my legal capacity, I felt even more confident. I now had not only a firm resolve, but also legal protection against possible attempts by the children to challenge my decision. On Wednesday morning, while I was feeding the cats at the shelter, my cell phone rang. The call was unexpected. Normally, no one would call me while I was working with animals. As I looked at the screen, I saw Kevin's name and felt something inside tense up. We hadn't spoken since that Sunday lunch, and the sudden call didn't bode well. Hello, Mom? My son's voice sounded dry and formal, without the usual attempts to feign filial concern. I need to talk to you. A serious talk. Hello, Kevin, I said, stepping away from the cages so as not to disturb the animals with my conversation. What's this about? Don't tell me you don't know what I'm talking about, he said, a touch of irritation in his voice. Tom Clark saw you outside Wilson's office last week, and yesterday, Linda Johnson told Lisa that she saw you leaving Dr. Clark's. What's going on? Tom Clark, it turns out, worked in the same building as Mr. Wilson's office, and Linda Johnson was Dr. Clark's neighbor. That's how it is in small towns. There's always someone who sees you and tells others. But I wasn't going to hide my actions or make excuses. I've decided to make some changes to my credentials, I said calmly, and I've undergone a medical examination. It's my right. What kind of changes? Kevin's voice became sharper. Mom, if someone is coercing or cheating you, you have to tell me. Older people are often victims of scammers. Older people, victims of scammers. So, in my son's mind, I was already an incompetent old woman who could be easily tricked and coerced into doing anything. That's what I was afraid of. That's why I got a mental health certificate in advance. No one is forcing me, I said, sitting down on a bench near the entrance to the shelter. I made the decision on my own, after much thought. Decision about what, exactly? Kevin was clearly losing his patience. Mom, stop talking in riddles. What did you do? I did, like I was a naughty child who broke a vase or soiled a new dress. There was no respect in my son's voice for my right to make my own decisions. I've changed my will, I said bluntly. All my assets will now go to the animal shelter where I volunteer. There was a long pause. I could hear Kevin breathing heavily into the phone, apparently trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Then there was an explosion of indignation. You're out of your mind, he shouted so loudly that I pulled the phone away from my ear. What animals? What shelter? Mom, this is the ravings of a mad woman. The Second Life shelter, where I've been working for 3 years, I explained patiently. You know I volunteer there, but you're not interested in it at all, as I realized from your conversation with Lisa last Sunday. Pause again. Apparently, Kevin was remembering exactly what they'd talked about in the kitchen while I was in the bathroom. What conversation? He asked, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. The one where you said you were sick of me telling you about the mongrels. The one where Lisa complained that I spent half an hour talking about the cat with one eye. Where you discussed plans to sell my house and put me in a nursing home in a few years. Now, the pause dragged on even longer. Kevin realized that I had heard their frank conversation and was apparently thinking feverishly about how to get out of it. Mom, you misunderstood, he finally began, changing to a softer tone. We were just discussing options for the future. It's normal for children to think about how best to take care of their parents. Take care of? I couldn't hold back a bitter chuckle. Kevin, you talked about inviting me here out of pity, that my stories about working at the orphanage annoyed you, that you had to have a clear conscience to have regular family dinners for the sake of appearances. Well, it's, Kevin clearly didn't know what to say. Look, can we get together and talk about this? I'll come to your place tonight. There's nothing to discuss, I replied. I've made my decision. My property will go to those who really appreciate me, not to those who tolerate me out of politeness. Mom, you can't be serious. Kevin's voice was panicked again. This is family money, Dad's money. He would never want it to go to some animal. The mention of Roger hit a nerve. My husband really loved animals. We went to that shelter together. We helped homeless cats and dogs together. He would have fully supported my decision if he had known how our children were treating me. Your father loved animals very much, I said, and he would never have tolerated the neglect you've shown me. Roger respected me as a person, not as a future inheritance. Mom, stop it. Kevin was clearly starting to lose his temper. You're talking nonsense. We love you. We care about you. Care? I got up from the bench and started walking nervously around the yard of the orphanage. Kevin, when was the last time you asked me what I was doing out of courtesy? When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you listened to me talk about my work at the shelter with genuine interest instead of barely concealed irritation? It's, it's different, he mumbled. I have a job, a family, worries. Everyone has worries, I interrupted. But some people still make time for the people they care about, and some people just put up with their parents for the sake of a future inheritance. Look, Kevin tried to pull himself together and adopt a business-like tone. Let's meet and discuss the situation calmly. Maybe you're right. Maybe we really haven't been attentive enough. But that's no reason to disinherit us for the sake of some animals. Some animals? He didn't even try to understand what working at the shelter meant to me, why I was putting my time and energy into it. To him, animals were just some animals, not worthy of serious consideration. Kevin, these some animals never said they were sick of me. They're not planning to sell my house and put me in a nursing home. They're just happy when I come and sad when I leave. It's called genuine love. Mom, are you comparing us to animals? There was genuine indignation in my son's voice. That's absurd. I'm comparing attitudes. And you know what? In this comparison, you lose. Animals are more honest than humans. They don't know how to pretend. I heard Kevin take a deep breath, apparently trying to pull himself together. Okay, he said finally. Okay, let's say we were wrong. Let's say we weren't really paying attention. But we can fix that. We could start talking more, seeing each other more often, taking an interest in your affairs. Why ruin the whole family over this? You've already ruined the family, I answered. The moment you started treating me as a source of future income instead of a mother. I'm just getting the paperwork in order. Mom, please. Kevin's voice turned pleading. Don't make any rash decisions. Think about it. Maybe we should split the inheritance, some for us, some for the orphanage. Now he was willing to compromise, when he realized he could lose everything, but it was too late for half measures. The decision is final, I said, and it's deliberate, not hasty. I've been thinking about it for days. Then I'll come to your place tonight with Lisa, Kevin said, returning to his demanding tone. We need to discuss this in person. You can come, I agreed, but the decision won't change. Mom, do you realize we could contest the will in court? Threatening notes in my son's voice did not scare me. You can try. I have a psychiatrist's certificate stating that I'm fully competent. I have a detailed record of the reasons for my decision. My lawyer warned me about the possibility of such an attempt. What lawyer? Kevin clearly didn't expect me to be so thoroughly prepared. Mr. Wilson, the same one who helped me after my father died. Very competent. Another pause. Kevin realized that I wasn't acting on impulse, but had a well-thought-out plan and professional support. Okay, he said in a cold tone. I'll see you tonight, and get ready to explain your decision not only to me, but also to Cynthia. She'll be there too. I'll be happy to see my daughter, I replied. I'd love to hear what she thinks of my animal stories. Kevin hung up without saying goodbye. I tucked the phone into my pocket and felt my hands shake a little from nervous tension. The first round had taken place. Now there was a face-to-face conversation with both kids to be had, and I had to be prepared for any of their arguments and threats. Back at the orphanage, I told Sarah about the impending family conflict. Without going into details, I explained that I had changed my will in favor of the orphanage, and the children were not happy about it. Ruth, are you sure about this? Sarah asked with concern. I don't want you to get your family in trouble because of us. I have a family here, I said, stroking the cat that was purring in my arms. And there were problems before. They just came out now. The rest of the day at the shelter went as usual, but I kept thinking about the upcoming meeting with the kids. What arguments would they make? Would they threaten to sue or try to pity me? Would they try to feign remorse and promise to change? But no matter what they say, I've already made my choice. For the first time in years, I had put my own interests and desires ahead of other people's expectations. And that decision gave me strength for the conversation ahead. At 7:30 in the evening, I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. Looking out the window, I saw Kevin's dark blue sedan and Cynthia's white crossover, so they'd both arrived as promised. I fixed my hair, smoothed my skirt, and prepared myself for a difficult conversation. The children entered the house with serious faces, as if they'd come for a business meeting, not to visit their mother. Kevin was dressed in a smart suit straight from work, Lisa in designer jeans and a blouse that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Cynthia looked tired. Apparently she'd driven here straight from work, but she had a determined look on her face. Hi, Mom, Cynthia said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. Unlike Kevin, she at least maintained a semblance of familial warmth, though there was tension in her eyes. We went into the living room, where I offered them coffee or tea. They all declined, apparently not in the mood for long ceremonies. Kevin and Lisa sat on the couch, Cynthia in the chair across from me. I took my usual place by the window, where I could see all three of them. Well, Kevin began without preamble, Cynthia is aware of the situation. We want to understand what's gotten into you. What's gotten into me? As if my decision had been the result of a temporary lapse of judgment rather than the deliberate choice of a mature woman. Nothing got into me, I replied calmly. I just realized how you really felt about me, and I adjusted the paperwork to fit my reality. Mom, Cynthia interjected in a soft tone. Kevin told me about that conversation. You may not have been very sensitive. She glanced reproachfully at her brother. But that's no reason to take such drastic measures. Why not? I asked. Isn't it logical to bequeath property to those who appreciate you, not to those who tolerate you out of a sense of duty? Mom, we love you, Lisa said, and her voice sounded sincere. It's just that sometimes people say things they don't mean, especially when tired or upset. Lisa, you and your husband discussed selling my house while I was still alive. You discussed putting me in a nursing home. Is that called love? Lisa blushed and looked at Kevin, waiting for support. Mom, we're thinking about your future, he interjected. At your age, you need to plan for different scenarios. That's caring, not indifference. Caring involves the person being cared for, I countered. And you planned my life for me without even asking my opinion. All right. Cynthia tried to take the initiative. Let's say we were wrong. But why the animal shelter? Mom, if you want to do charity work, there are plenty of worthy organizations. Hospitals, schools, children's charities. Because at the shelter, I'm valued for what I do, not what I have, I explained. No one there thinks my stories about my work are a nuisance. Oh, come on, don't tell me those stories. Kevin couldn't take it anymore. Mom, you're a grown-up. Don't you realize that constant stories about mongrel dogs can get tiresome? Some mutts. He repeated the same phrase he used with his wife. So his attitude toward my work was really just that dismissive. Kevin, to me, these mongrels are living things that need help, I said. To you, my stories about them are a nuisance. That's the difference. Mom, seriously, Lisa intervened with a patronizing smile. You're an educated woman. Can't you find a more intellectual hobby? Book club, art history courses, gardening, finally. What's non-intellectual about saving lives? I asked. It's not about that. Cynthia was clearly trying to find diplomatic words. It's about, well, how can I put this? Your preoccupation with this subject sometimes seems excessive. Excessive. So wanting to help homeless animals seemed excessive to my kids, and planning to sell my house while I was alive seemed normal. Cynthia, what seems like a normal level of passion to you? I asked. 2 hours a week? An hour a month? Well, I don't know. She hesitated. Maybe you shouldn't make it the center of your life. What should be the center of my life? I continued my interrogation. Waiting for your infrequent visits? Watching television? Knitting doilies? Mom, don't exaggerate, Kevin grumbled. Sometimes it just seems like you care more about stray animals than your own family. And I get the impression that you care more about my inheritance than I do. There was a long pause. The children looked at each other, apparently realizing that the persuasive tactics weren't working. All right, Kevin changed his tone to a harder one. If you're so inclined, let's be blunt. Do you really think it's fair to give the family money to some animals? Family money? I interjected. Kevin, it's my money. The money my father and I earned. The money we've accumulated over the years. But we're your children, Cynthia exclaimed. We have a natural right to inherit. Natural right arises from natural love, I replied. What's natural about your Sunday dinners out of pity? Enough with the pity dinners, Kevin exploded. Mom, we invited you over because it's the right thing to do, because we're well-mannered people. Did you want us to ignore you completely? I wanted you to invite me over because you miss me, not because it's the right thing to do, I said quietly. Look, Lisa leaned forward as if about to share an important secret. Maybe we really could spend more time together. Go to the theater, travel. But this fiddling with stray dogs of yours? Frankly, it's repulsive. Fiddling with stray dogs. Another definition of my work at the shelter. To Lisa, rescuing animals was just fiddling, an undignified activity that repulses decent people. Lisa, I said, feeling the anger rising in me, I'm not going to give up a cause I think is important for the sake of not pushing you away. Then don't take offense that we don't share your enthusiasm, she said sharply. I'm not offended. I'm just drawing conclusions. Cynthia tried to take control of the situation. Mom, let's try to find a compromise. You can leave the orphanage some of the money, let's say a third, and the rest for us. Wouldn't that be fair? Fair to who? I asked. To you, who see my work as fiddling with stray dogs, or to the animals who really need help? My kids, Kevin snapped. Mom, we're your family. Are any animals more important than us? Animals aren't more important, I said. It's sincerity. Animals can't pretend. If a dog wags his tail, it means he's really happy. If a cat purrs, it means it's happy. And you've learned to masterfully feign concern for the sake of future gain. That's not fair. Cynthia shook her head. You're judging us by one bad conversation. One overheard conversation? I corrected. How many conversations have there been that I haven't heard? The kids looked at each other again. Apparently, there had been a lot of conversations. Okay. Kevin got up from the couch. If you're so inclined, we'll go to court. We'll prove that you acted under the influence of a third party or in a state of diminished capacity. I have a psychiatrist's certificate, I reminded him, and a detailed record of all the reasons for my decision. And we have witnesses to your strange behavior, he threatened. Neighbors saw you talking to the cats in the yard. The pet store clerks can confirm that you spend unreasonable amounts of money on pet food. Talking to cats and buying food for the shelter as evidence of my incapacity. That's what my kids are willing to do for money. Kevin, I said, rising from my seat, thank you for opening my eyes completely. I can see now that I made the right decision. Mom, think about it some more, Cynthia asked. You have time to change the will back. I have plenty of time, I agreed, but I don't want to change my mind. Lisa stood up and headed for the exit. I told you that this is a waste of time. She threw to her husband. It's useless to argue with stubborn old men. Stubborn old men. Another definition of people my age who dare to have an opinion of their own. Cynthia came over to me and tried to hug me, but I pulled away. Mom, I hope you change your mind, she said. We are a family after all. Family is those who love you for who you are, I replied, not the ones who put up with you bequeathing something to them. Kevin stopped in the doorway. Okay, have it your way, but don't expect us to visit you or take care of you in your old age. Since we're such bad kids, you're on your own. I will, I nodded. I have friends at the orphanage, real friends. When the kids left, slamming the door, I sat back in my chair and felt strangely relieved. At last, all the cards were finally laid bare. No longer did I have to pretend there was a warm, familial relationship between us. No longer did I have to put up with their condescending attitude toward my work at the orphanage. They showed their true colors: threats of legal action, attempts to make me look incompetent, disparaging remarks about fiddling with stray dogs. All this finally confirmed to me the correctness of my decision. In the evening, I called Mr. Wilson and told him of the conversation. He listened carefully and advised me to put all the threats in writing in case the children actually sue. Your will is legally sound, he assured me. They would have little chance of contesting it, especially given the certificate of capacity. Going to bed, I thought about the fact that today one chapter of my life finally closed and another began. A chapter where I was no longer a convenient mother, but an independent woman doing what she thought was right. And I wasn't scared at all. For the next 2 weeks, my life became a real siege. The kids apparently decided that direct threats didn't work and moved on to more subtle tactics, trying to influence me through acquaintances and neighbors. It was humiliating and painful, but it also opened my eyes to how far Kevin and Cynthia were willing to go for money. The first to arrive was Dr. Miller, our family doctor who had been seeing me for over a decade. He called Thursday morning and asked me to come into his office for a routine checkup. I was surprised. We usually made appointments ahead of time, and the last checkup was only 3 months ago. Dr. Miller's office was in a medical center about 20 minutes from my house. An older man with a gray beard and kind eyes, he had always made me trust him with his professionalism and humane approach to his patients. But today, there was something unusual about his demeanor. He seemed tense and avoided direct gaze. "Ruth, how are you?" he asked, motioning for me to sit on the couch. "How are you feeling?" "Fine, doctor," I replied. "But you know I have regular checkups. Why the unscheduled visit?" Dr. Miller hesitated, then sighed heavily. "Ruth, I got a call from your son. Kevin's worried about your mental state. He says you've made some strange decisions about the will." Here it is. So the children have decided to involve even the doctors in their campaign to find medical grounds for declaring me incompetent. "Doctor," I said calmly, "I was recently examined by a psychiatrist. I have a certificate of full legal capacity." "Yes, Kevin mentioned that." The doctor nodded. "But he thinks that you may have concealed from the psychiatrist some episodes of inappropriate behavior." "What kind of episodes?" I asked. Dr. Miller was clearly uncomfortable. "Well, he says you spend unreasonable amounts of money on pet food, that you talk to cats and dogs like they're people, that you bequeathed your entire estate to some shelter. And these seem like signs of mental illness to you?" I asked. "Ruth, I've known you for years." The doctor tried to find the right words. "You've always been a sensible, practical woman. And now, well, maybe you need to reconsider some decisions." "Doctor," I said firmly, "I buy food for the shelter where I volunteer. I talk to the animals because it helps them socialize, and I bequeathed assets to an organization that's doing something important. Where's the inadequacy in that?" The doctor threw up his hands. "You may be right, but your children are genuinely concerned." "My children are worried about their inheritance," I interrupted, "not my health." After that conversation, I realized that the campaign against me was just beginning. Indeed, on Friday, my neighbor Barbara White, a woman about my age with whom we sometimes chatted over the fence about gardening matters, came to see me. Barbara looked confused but determined. We sat in my kitchen drinking tea, and she paced around for a long time before getting to the point of the visit. "Ruth, dear," she began at last, "your daughter Cynthia called me. She's very worried about you. That's how it is. Now the children have even got the neighbors involved in their campaign." "Barbara, what exactly is it that bothers you about my behavior?" I asked you bluntly. "Well," the neighbor hesitated, "Cynthia says you've been spending too much time with the animals, and that it's, how shall I put it, not very normal for a woman your age." "What's normal for a woman my age?" I asked. "Sit at home and wait to die?" "Ruth, don't exaggerate." Barbara was obviously sorry she'd agreed to this mission. "It's just, well, maybe you should find a better hobby. Something more social? More social than helping homeless animals? You know, like a gardening club or a history club where you could socialize with people in your circle." "Your circle." So, according to my kids and their allies, the volunteers at the shelter weren't my kind of people. Too plain, not respectable enough for a widow from a decent neighborhood. "Barbara," I said, "have you ever seen a dog that was abandoned on the road start to trust people again? How a cat that's been living in a basement and afraid of human hands suddenly starts purring and lets itself be petted?" No, I haven't seen it, the neighbor admitted. But I see it every day, and it gives me more joy than any gardening club. Barbara left without accomplishing the mission my children had given her. But that was just the beginning. On Saturday, Margaret Green, a longtime friend with whom we had been friends since our children had gone to the same school, rang the doorbell. An elegant woman in her 70s, always impeccably dressed and combed, she was something of an opinion leader in our circle. "Ruth, darling," she said as she came into the living room, "I need to have a serious talk with you." We were seated in armchairs by the window, and Margaret got right to the point. "Kevin called me. He told me about your unusual decision about the will." "And what confused you about it?" I asked. "Ruth, seriously." Margaret shook her head. "Bequeathing the family money to some animal? That's absurd." "Why absurd?" "Because you have children, blood children." She sounded like she was explaining the obvious. "No matter what happened between you, they're still your family." "Family isn't just blood," I argued. "It's also a relationship based on love and respect." "Ruth, you sound like a teenager," Margaret said with a wince. "You have to be more practical at our age. Children are children. They're not always perfect, but that's no reason to disinherit them. What if they think my main passion in life is fiddling with stray dogs?" "Well," Margaret hesitated. Perhaps they had not put it well, but frankly, Ruth, your fascination with these animals does seem excessive. Another one. Another person in my circle thought my work at the shelter was excessive and inappropriate. "Margaret, what do you think is an appropriate occupation for a widow of my age?" "Well, hospital charity work, for instance, or helping out at church, or cultural activities. Something more, respectable." "Saving the lives of animals isn't respectable enough?" "Ruth, that's not the point." Margaret was clearly losing patience. "It's that you've become too emotionally involved. You talk about every dog and cat as if they were family. Is that a bad thing?" "It's weird," Margaret said bluntly. "And people are starting to talk." People are starting to talk. That's what really bothered my friend, not my happiness or well-being, but the opinions of others in our social circle. "What exactly are people saying?" I inquired. "That you're, well, how shall I put it? You've become a little eccentric, that your affection for animals seems unhealthy. And on the basis of all this talk, you thought my will should be changed?" "Ruth, I just want you to think about your reputation. What people will say when they find out you left all that money to the orphanage instead of your own children. Reputation, people's opinions, social conventions. All of these things seemed more important to Margaret than my right to control my own life and property." "Margaret," I said calmly, "I am 72 years old. How much time do I have left to worry about my reputation? Wouldn't that time be better spent doing what I think is important?" "But the children?" "The children made their own choices when they began discussing the sale of my house in my lifetime." Margaret left, clearly dissatisfied with the outcome of her mission, but the visits continued. On Sunday, Pastor Wilson from our church arrived, a man in his 60s, with mild manners and an affable appearance. He had always seemed to me to be a sincere man of faith, but today his visit was also initiated by my children. "Ruth," he said, sitting in my living room with a cup of coffee, "Cynthia has come to me for advice. She is worried about the state of your family." "Pastor, what do you think of the commandment to honor thy father and thy mother?" I asked instead of answering. "It is one of the foundations of Christian morality," he replied. "Children should respect and care for their parents. And if the parents don't feel that respect?" Pastor Wilson was silent for a moment, thinking about his answer. "Ruth, family conflict is always a test of faith, but forgiveness and reconciliation are a Christian duty. And condemning a mother's choice to engage in saving God's creatures is also a Christian duty?" I asked. Ruth, no one is condemning your kindness to animals, but perhaps you should find a balance between ministry and family responsibilities. Even my pastor, a minister of a religion that preaches love for all living things, considered my helping animals as secondary to my family responsibilities. After the pastor left, I sat in a chair by the window and thought about how many people my children had managed to attract to their campaign. The doctor, neighbors, friends, even the church, they all felt it was their duty to convince me to abandon my weird decision and return to being a convenient mother. But none of them asked if I was happy in the orphanage. No one asked how I felt when an animal I had helped found a new home. No one wanted to understand why working with homeless cats and dogs had become the meaning of my life. For all these people in my circle, social conventions, reputation, and the opinion of others were more important. And my feelings, my desires, my right to happiness in my own understanding did not matter. In the evening, I called the shelter and learned that 3 kittens, which we nursed last month, found owners. And the young cat who had been brought in with a broken leg had fully recovered and was also waiting for a new family. This news warmed my soul more than all the entreaties of the well-wishers. I realized that the pressure would continue. The children were clearly determined to use every possible leverage to force me to change my will. But with each new visit, with each new attempt to convince me of the wrongness of my choice, I became more and more convinced of its fairness. People who really valued me worked at the shelter and didn't try to re-educate me or remake me to fit their ideas of what a right older woman should be. It's been 6 months since the day I changed my will. In that time, my life has changed dramatically, and strangely enough, has become much calmer and happier. No more agonizing Sunday lunches where I felt unwelcome. No more fake phone calls with off-duty questions about my health. Kevin and Cynthia disappeared from my life as suddenly as rain disappears after a thunderstorm, leaving behind only clean air. On this sunny April day, I arrived at the shelter earlier than usual, at 8:30 in the morning. I wanted to spend more time with the animals who have become my real family. Spring in Manassas Park was especially beautiful this year. The trees were blooming with lush white and pink clouds. The grass was a lush emerald green, and the air was filled with the scent of apple blossoms. Sarah greeted me at the entrance with her usual warm smile, but there was a special excitement in her eyes. Ruth, I have wonderful news for you, she said, putting her arm around my shoulders. Do you remember Spotty, that tricolored cat who lived with us for over a year? Of course I remembered Spotty. That cat with the crooked tail and not the most spectacular appearance couldn't find owners for a long time. Potential families always chose younger and prettier animals, and she kept waiting, never giving up hope. What's wrong with her? I asked, feeling my heart clench with worry. She was taken by an elderly couple last night, Sarah said brightly. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. He's recently retired and she's been wanting a cat all her life. They were looking for just the right calm, mature animal, and Spotty was perfect for them. The joy I felt at this news was so bright and pure it brought tears to my eyes. Blur finally found her home, her family, who chose her not for her beauty, but for her character. And how did she behave when you met her? I asked. Wonderful, Sarah told me with enthusiasm, as if she realized that these were the people she had been waiting for. She purred, rubbed her legs, even let herself be picked up at once. The Thompsons were thrilled. We walked through the familiar corridors of the shelter, and I looked into the cage where Blurry used to live. There was a new resident already settling in, a young cat of red color who had been brought in the day before yesterday. He looked at me warily with yellow eyes, but he didn't hiss or hide in the corner, which was a good sign. Hello, handsome, I said quietly, reaching out my hand to the bars of the cage. What's your name? We named him Archie, Sarah said. He was found in an industrial area, thin and scared, but he's on the mend. Archie sniffed my fingers tentatively, then licked them unexpectedly with his rough tongue. This simple gesture of trust, as always, touched me to the core. This was real communication. No falsity, no ulterior motives, no calculation for future benefits. The large dog room was bustling with the usual morning life. The barking, the squealing, the sounds of feeding and cleaning created the familiar symphony of the shelter. Tom, an elderly volunteer who had been working here for 5 years, was cleaning the enclosures and humming some old song. Jane was bottle feeding the puppies, a litter whose mother had been killed by a car this week. Ruth, Jane called out to me, look at the babies. Their eyes have opened and they're starting to play with each other. I went over to the pen where 4 tiny puppies were playing. They looked like plush toys, chubby, clumsy, with huge paws that they had yet to grow into. One of the puppies, the boldest, waddled over to me and tried to bite the laces of my shoes. This one's gonna be a leader, Jane laughed. He's the first to push everyone to the bowl, the first to explore new toys. As I watched the puppies play, I thought about how my life had changed over the past 6 months. I used to come to the shelter as a place to forget my loneliness and family problems. Now it was my true calling, a cause to which I gave my whole soul. After Roger died, I thought the most important things in life were over, that it remains only to live, trying not to interfere with the children and grandchildren to build their future. But it turned out that at 72, it was possible to start a new chapter of life, to find a new meaning of existence. Ruth, the director of the shelter, Mr. Harris, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and the tired face of a man who had seen too much animal suffering, approached me. May I speak with you? We walked into his small office, littered with file folders and photos of happy animals in their new homes. On the desk was a cup of cold coffee and a stack of bills, the perennial problem of the nonprofit organization. Ruth, I wanted to thank you for all you do for the shelter, he began. Your help is invaluable. The animals feel your genuine love. I have you to thank, I replied, for letting me find my place in life. In fact, Mr. Harris hesitated, choosing his words. I've heard about your family, differences. I want you to know that if your loved ones pressure you about the will, we won't accept an inheritance that hurts you. His words touched me. That's what true caring meant, the willingness to give up gain for the well-being of another person. Mr. Harris, my children care more about money than my happiness, I said honestly, and your organization gives me the opportunity to do something important. I have no regrets. After talking to the director, I went back to my normal routine. I helped Sarah schedule vaccinations for new residents, played with the kittens in the socialization room, and walked the 3 medium-sized dogs who needed the most exercise. Around 2 p.m., as I was feeding the cats in the back room, Sarah came up to me with a serious face. Ruth, there's a letter for you, she said, holding out a white envelope. The courier brought it right here. I took the envelope and saw the logo of Smith, Jones and Associates. The return address read, on behalf of Kevin Harrison and Cynthia Parker. So my kids hired lawyers after all and decided to take the case to court. Do you want to read it at home? Sarah asked, seeing the look on my face. No, I'll read it now, I replied. It's better to know what I'm dealing with. I opened the envelope and pulled out an official document on letterhead. The letter was written in a dry legal style, but its meaning was clear. Dear Mrs. Harrison, the letter began, you are hereby notified that our clients, Kevin Harrison and Cynthia Parker, intend to contest your will dated March 14th of this year. The basis for the challenge is based on evidence our clients have of your diminished capacity at the time the document was made, as well as the possible influence of third parties on your decision. It went on to list the evidence of my incapacity: witness statements from neighbors about me talking to animals, pet store certificates about excessive spending on food, opinions of acquaintances about inadequate behavior. At the end of the letter was an ultimatum: either I voluntarily revoke the will within 30 days, or the case would go to court. As I read the letter, I felt not fear or upset, but a strange peace. At last, all the cards were finally laid bare. I no longer had to wonder what my children might come to in the battle for their inheritance. Bad news? Sarah asked cautiously. Predictable news, I replied, putting the letter back in the envelope. My children are suing to have me declared incompetent. Oh my God, Sarah spluttered. Ruth, that's terrible. What are you going to do? I'm going to go on with my life, I said calmly, and keep doing what I think is right. The rest of the day went on as usual. I didn't let the letter spoil my mood or distract me from my work. I helped bathe an old dog who was afraid of water, played with the kittens who were learning to use the litter box, and fed the birds in the outdoor aviaries. Each of these simple tasks reminded me of why I made the choice I did. This is where my help was truly needed. Here, no one judged my competence by whether I talked to the animals or bought feed. That evening, at home, I called Mr. Wilson and told him about the letter I had received. Ruth, I expected this, he said calmly. We're ready for the trial. We have a psychiatrist's report, detailed records of your motives, evidence of your activity. Can they prove anything? I doubt it. Talking to animals is not a sign of incompetence. It's a scientifically proven way to socialize pets. Buying food for a shelter is charitable, not wasteful. And your decision to change your will has a clear motivation. How long can the process take? A few months, maybe more, but I'm confident of a favorable outcome for us. After talking to my lawyer, I sat in my favorite chair by the window with a cup of herbal tea. In the garden bloomed tulips, which I planted in the fall, not knowing that my life would change so dramatically. Then I was a lonely widow trying to please indifferent children. Now I was a free woman who chose her own path. The trial did not frighten me. Let my children try to prove that love for animals is insane. Let them bring witnesses who think working at a shelter is an unworthy occupation for a decent woman. I have something more important: the certainty of my choice. As I went to bed, I thought about Spotty, who has finally found a home, about the puppies who will play and grow tomorrow, about Archie, who is learning to trust people again. All of these animals will get a chance at happiness through the work of the shelter to which I have decided to bequeath my estate. And my children will get a lesson that love can't be faked for money and respect can't be bought with threats. Maybe someday they'll realize that, or maybe they won't. But that's their choice, just like changing my will was mine. And I had no regrets.